What belt have we worked our way up to?
I'm brown belt. I've been brown for 2 years now, so it's like the closest basically possible to black. And then I'll probably get that next year, which would be really cool. But I'm also in no hurry.
Yeah. Hey, why? What's the hurry for?
Yeah, the second I'm going to try. I have a competition I signed up for last night in a month and a half, which is at brown belt, obviously. And so when I have to start competing against black belts, I've done it a couple of times, but it just like changes the game. So I'll take the brown a little bit longer if I can.
Do you normally do competitions?
I do them on occasion. Yeah. So I'll at least like once a year. Yeah.
Oh, good deal. Russ, when are you going to catch up, dude?
Well, I believe last time we talked on this show, I told you I wanted to try and audition for APW, All Pro Wrestling, and you called me a fat guy with no motivation. So I think
and old
and old. Yeah. So I think the elements are against me there.
Yeah, man. I'm just looking out for your health. That's it. But, so Riley, first of all, thanks for joining us, man. We appreciate it. We know you're on the whole press junket, and I know it's exhausting, so we appreciate you carving a little bit of time for us, man.
Oh, of course. No, I'm happy to be here. I love the movie, so I'm just trying to make sure that I talk to anybody who wants to. It's all for the good of the film.
Well, you've been on our radar for a long time, man, and we were so excited when this all came together because you were on our list of like people that we want to reach out to, and I'm glad we got this done, especially because Russell and I typically are recording in the same room. I'm unfortunately here in the godforsaken city of Phoenix, Arizona, for work, so we're just making everything happen today. But
I love it. Happy to be here.
So all right. So we'll kick it off like this. So Riley, like I said, I'm here in Phoenix, and my day job is I'm a training manager for a startup company. Let's just call it that. And yesterday was a pretty rough day. All right, a lot of emotions were going on, and so today I wanted to kind of have a nice reset because I wasn't really sure how the team was going to be. So my icebreaker today was also decided to do a little bit double dipping because it's been a few years since I have seen your short film, The Cub. So that is what my training class watched this morning as a team building exercise.
I love it. Probably threw it into chaos.
It got a nice little heated discussion going on. It was a good way. It was a good way to start the day. And I'll tell you, I think we had 5-6 people in there so far today, and I'll tell you, half of them were parents, and more than not, especially with the parents, they kind of thought it was a good idea.
I like these parents.
Yeah, to loan your child out to a pack of wolves, but that's a short that I saw Faults first, and then I saw the Cub later, but man, what a great short, and man, it really started a nice heated discussion today.
I love it. Thank you. Yeah, that short I am still very proud of, and I think if you look at Duel and the Cub back to back, you can definitely tell they were made by the same person. If anything, Faults was the feature that I made right after that was the one where I had to kind of back off a little bit just to get it made. And then The Art of Self-Defense, I got to kind of go back into a little bit more stylized mode and back at that again with Duel.
And look, please forgive me, Riley. I have to ask the obligatory question, but what did you shoot the Cub with?
We shot the Cub on, that was Super 16, and okay. It was easy, obviously, at that point. That was 2012 when I shot that, so it wasn't that's all that you could get was film. There were multiple ways that we could have gone, but I did a Kickstarter and asked for $3,000 because I had already spent on a previous short some of my own money, and I didn't want to have to do that again if I could avoid it. And I figured out some cool rewards and got a small community to donate, and then ended up getting 5 instead of 3. So the extra 2, we basically were like, I think we can do this on film, and kind of just ran with that. And I'm glad that we did. There are other people, like you look at YouTube comments of that short now, and they're like, God, they spent $5,000 on this. I could have done this on my iPhone. It would have been so much better too. And like they didn't even move the fucking camera. Like it's just, everyone wants to complain about everything, but I'm very, very happy with the way that one turned out.
Yeah. But also, like, you kind of set the tone with the Cub, because you talked about the connection with, you can tell that the person that made the Cub made your new film Duel. But also, like, in all your films, you've kind of got this very particular way of with your actors delivering lines. So, what did that sort of come from? How you sort of reach that sort of aesthetic?
Yeah, I think that in recent years, I've been able to describe it a little bit more eloquently. I think initially I probably was just like, I just like the way that it sounds. But I think that the reason I like the way that it sounds, it gets more to the heart of the issue, which is that if you're creating a world, and in these worlds, things happen that wouldn't happen in our world, having characters speak to each other like normal feels like it's almost like doing a disservice to the world that you're building. So I would rather, like with Duel, for example, people who talk to each other this way are also the people who they vote into law that a duel to the death will take place if your clone doesn't want to be decommissioned. And then
Sure.
that world is a world where people would talk this way. And so it all like informs everything else. I would say that the dialogue and the affectation, or I guess the emotional disconnect from the way that people deliver their lines, is fully in support of a world. And it may not be for everyone, and some people may actually be very turned off by that. But a lot of people who would be turned off by that are also not into the movie itself. So it's not something that I'm concerned about. It's something that I actually, if anything, have been leaning into more and more.
So is that something that, naturally one would make the assumption that you can figure that out in the audition process, or even in the script, actors kind of have an idea of the sort of affectation you're going for?
The script, I think, pretty much reads like there's not a lot of ways to go about that. I think that the dialogue is pretty obviously going to have a form of delivery along these lines. It's just like, it ends up being, how much do I want that to be in place? And so with Karen, for example, she came in and had already seen Faults and The Art of Self-Defense, which is a great scenario I'm in now, because people can go back and watch the stuff that I've done before and at least have an informed idea of where I'm going to be going. But she also was like, are we doing Faults or are we doing like self-defense? And weirdly, I think that they were somewhere in the middle. I felt like it was a little bit more grounded, but I've since basically been told by everyone that this is even drier than self-defense. So I don't know, like, I think it's just normal for me that I almost don't even realize it anymore. But it's honestly, it ends up being just what level do you want me to go? And that trust on the actor's end is huge, because I'm asking them to do stuff that they would probably never do, or it's a very uncomfortable sort of space to be in. The dialogue itself can be very challenging at times because it's so like parenthetically based. You kind of talk about something and then you go back to another thing and then you go back to the first thing, and it's not necessarily easy, but it's really fun to write. And I'm glad that I get to work with people who are so talented that they can take that and really run with it.
Yeah, because Art of Self-Defense and Duel, completely different films.
Yeah, very much so. And I'm glad that you said that.
Yeah, totally. Well, and also, Russ, get in here. You would agree with me, right? That, even though, I'd say that Duel is drier, but and certainly I would even say Art of Self-Defense is a black comedy. And we certainly get that with Duel. But yeah, very different films.
I don't know. Riley, I had a different journey here. I was introduced to you through bullying. Everybody around me. Because when Art of Self-Defense came out, I was like, I don't know, man. This looks kind of like an Austin offbeat, kind of like quirky drama. I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be into that. And we had our buddy out here, filmmaker.
Let's provide Riley with a little bit of background. So Riley, Russell is Mr. Contrarian USA. He hates comedies. Now, I've tried to do my best, and I myself am a recovering stand-up. So it's something near and dear to my heart. So I try to bring him into the fold, but this is a very jaded horror fan you're talking to here.
It is true.
Awesome.
I am one of the anti-elevated horror kind of guys. Like, I'm very packed. And our buddy was over. I think we were doing like an all-night marathon of movies. And Robbie Smith threw on Cub, and he was like, "Dude, you're wrong. You need to watch Cub." And Cub's turned into a short film that we prove that we're the cool guys by putting on for people. And I was like, all right, I'll check out Art of Self-Defense. And dude, I was blown away by not only the clear, you have like an auteur voice, like it's so clearly you. And I mean, not only in like dialogue, because you're crafting a kind of like modern world that is like another reality, kind of like Her, or like It Follows, where it's like, I don't know when we're supposed to be happening, but like it's not now, or maybe it is. And it's always so revealing, like the way we interact with each other when you're kind of like free of a time frame. And with, the Art of Self-Defense, I love the way that you crafted that dojo. Like there's a beam in the middle of that floor that would obscure the camera in a way that I've thought about ever since I watched it. Because it almost seemed like counter to like mise en scène. It's like, no, we're going to put that beam here and it's going to be in the way and you're going to think about it. But like, I don't know, dude, you have such a unique voice that when I jumped into Duel, it felt like you through and through.
Thank you.
I felt like both movies are happening in the same world. So
yeah, they're in the same like space, but I think of them in different ways. Like they're trying to achieve different things. There's, I think, more, even though both are very dark, I think that there's more of an entertainment value to something like Self-Defense. I think it also obviously ends with a pretty like positive ending. But I think you're right, though, that they could be in the same sort of pseudo world. I really touching really quick on that beam. I found that location, and it was next door. I'd gone driving around Louisville, Kentucky, where we were shooting, and found this spot. And I was like, maybe we could use this for something for the dojo. It wasn't going to work. It was just like trashed once we got in. But then we went next door, and I was like, well, this kind of could look like the veterinarian's office. And then once we were able to get keys to go inside. And I was like, wait, if we tore down walls, we could make the dojo here. And then there's also the garage in the back where the motorcycles could be. And there's the locker room space and all this stuff. But that beam was fully just like load bearing. We're never getting that thing out of there. And so we just decided to embrace it and say, that thing's going in the middle of the fucking mats.
Well, I mean, that beam could be kind of a mascot for your films. Because, I mean, honestly, it's like you craft this perfect, beautiful Hollywood reality, yet the films are all about like tackling the quirky, imperfect nature. And it's beauty is in the imperfections, and I thoroughly believe that. And that beam, dude, I think about that beam more than anything else from that film.
You're the first person who's ever mentioned. I love this.
People are dumb. Now,
confirmed.
Also, I haven't seen Clark since he's been in Arizona, and we haven't talked about your film. I don't know if I expressed it, but I fucking love Duel. I think it's gonna probably be my favorite of the year. And I know
do you like it more than the last Duel? Because I know you were a big fan on that one, Russ.
Dude, it crushes the last Duel.
Okay, good
man.
No, that's right. Riley, fuck you, Ridley. You heard it here.
No, Riley. Okay, I have to flatter you a little bit, dude. We just got out. Last week we talked about Everything, Everywhere, All at Once, and we fell into a conversation of like art and commerce, and like that's the real struggle when you have a like wide theatrical release. And ultimately, at the end of the day, I didn't love Everything because I felt like it was a little too cute. And I chalked that up to like the commerce end, like just getting families and, like kind of like basic bitch film people in there. And I'm like, I get it, but I like it when they're a little more edgy with the art. And when I saw your film, I'm like, man, you nailed it. I get a lot of slack for bringing up like duality with mirrors in film. Like it's one of my favorite themes. And I think you've evolved that theme. And the idea of like we're living in a Marvel metaverse world, right? And everything's even fucking everything was about the metaverse. And yet you like kind of slipped that in there. And I'm like, the way that you did it was profound in a way that got me originally into film, where I think I might make life changes after watching Duel. It's fucking incredible.
I mean, thank you very much. It's my favorite thing I've made, and it means so much to me. It's a very personal film, and I think that there's way more going on in it emotionally and in terms of humanity than I think some people are giving it credit for. But that's part of like showing your stuff to people, is you know that not everyone's going to relate to it the way that you do, but that's okay.
But dude, you got a lot going on here. And like I mentioned, I got into film by taking 2 community college courses in film theory. And I thought I figured it all out. And I'm like, dude, watching Duel, I mean, now I'm looking back at every movie that had a clone in it. And I'm kind of like, these are beautiful metaphors for a different way to live your life. Except I don't think anybody made it so succinct like you did. It's fucking like by the end of the movie, and again, I'm not going to spoil anything, but me and Oksana, who's here in the room with us, I think she was pretty bummed out by the ending. And I had to argue it, saying, actually, it's not bummy. It's not bleak in the way you think it is, but it is kind of sad.
Yeah, I laugh. That the ending always makes me laugh. It just shows where my personality's at, though. When you see, and I guess we won't talk about the spoilers of it, but like when you see where it ends up, I can't help but just find the humor in that situation. And I think that there are people who agree, but I also think that it's deliberately, it goes down this path, and I know that people wanted another thing to happen, and I just never felt like that was true to the film. So I like that you liked that ending, and I know that it's going to be hard for some people too, but I think it's the only way that the film could have ended.
Well, dude, people want a different ending, but I mean, in real life, we're in that situation probably multiple times in our shared time here on Earth, and we don't get the other ending. And you look at it, and you're kind of like, it's only our fault. So I don't know. Dude, it's a fantastic film.
Thank you.
Agreed.
Thank you very
and
much.
What I want to say is that Riley, I want to congratulate you on this, because now I'll stay away from the ending. Just the entire film had a constant feel of melancholy. And I want to commend you on that, because I am heavily medicated on SSRIs. So you've done a great job of making me feel, which is something that, these drugs are, cutting off. So you are better than prescription drugs, Riley. So I'll just say that.
People keep telling me this. It's a thing that I've heard my whole life.
Man, I mean, so, we were talking about commerce and art, and you found like a perfect medium here. Like, I don't know how many times I've been playing like a tabletop game or like video games with people, and the whole clone debate comes up, where it's like, yeah, if you meet a clone, you have to fight to the death. I don't know how that became like popular, like zeitgeist. I don't know where that came from, but I also don't understand how nobody made a movie until now.
I mean, I don't know that I've really heard that before. I think that I've been asked that question more because of Duel now. Like, if you had to fight your clone to the death, like, how would you win? And I don't know that was a part of my sort of zeitgeist, like you said. Like, yeah. So, which is so interesting to hear you say that. But I agree. Like, I think it's a pretty overt, like, oh, I'm surprised nobody has ever gone down this exact path before. So I'm glad they didn't.
Yeah, I mean, I did preface that by saying over tabletop games, so maybe I'm just a nerd in rolling dice. But yet, it would come up all the time. Like, I mean, it's one of those dumb conversations when you get into like time machine theory and stuff, and running into another you. It's like, well, you have to fight because but I never understood why. And you kind of, without even having that conversation, made a movie perfectly explaining it.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, a friend of mine, now that you mentioned it, a friend of mine wrote something that I hope gets made at some point where there's a time machine thing, and 2 people have to fight, like 2 versions of the same person. And he's going pretty big with his fight. But I think in like, what's that Paul Rudd show, Living with Yourself? I wrote... Yeah, the clone thing. He has a big fight sequence with himself, and they really went for it. And ours is like more the prep for this fight. Like how does that influence your life? What decisions do you make based on that inevitability and all of that? But I remember when that came out in 2018, or maybe it was 19. whenever it was, I remember being like, God damn it, I've got this script. Like, this is a little similar. And then I saw it and I was totally fine. But yeah, I'm surprised you didn't. Yeah, it was on Netflix, so maybe that also happens where things end up on Netflix and nobody sees them because there's so much shit there.
I'm bad with TV too. Everybody will attest to that.
I'm kind of bad with TV too. Yeah.
It's too much of a commitment. I can't do.
There's a lot. I like movies. Yeah. I like a succinct story.
Now, who are some major influences for you? Because I was thinking about this on the ride here, and I came up with like Douglas Sirk and Yorgos Lanthimos, and I'm like, that can't be right.
Douglas Sirk is your go-to answer for everything, just for the record.
When we're dealing about like false reality in film, he's the king of it.
Sure.
And I get a lot of that from Riley.
So surprisingly, I'm not a cinephile. I think I'm probably one of the dumbest people when it comes to movie knowledge out of directors and peers. But I totally own it, and I do not know the Douglas Sirk. Why am I? Is there a movie that I would know that I'm just blanking on?
No. And Clark's right. It's an easy deep cut to bring up too and be like, oh, Douglas Sirk. No, basically, he had a famous scene in a movie called Imitation of Life, where it's a hyper Hollywood film, except there's a reveal at the end where this lady's in a cabin with her lover, and they pull back the curtains, and there's this beautiful scene of what looks like a mall, like Santa setup, where there's a fake deer, and it's aggressively fake. And it's one of those things that the director was panned at the time for. But later, college students learned, like, well, he got trapped in the Weepy studio and he was making drama for like women, and he never wanted to do that. So he started like fighting back in his movies.
That's really cool.
Yeah, but whenever we have a theme of like what could be regular reality, and then you're kind of aggressively reminded, like, no, we're confronting some shit here. I always go to Douglas Sirk.
I'm going to do my research now. I got to do my due diligence. Yorgos is somebody you can definitely throw in there as more of a recent influence. I do remember the first time I saw Dogtooth going, I'm never going to watch that again. And then eventually realized that it was one of my favorite movies. But weirdly, I think I was even more influenced by one of his peers. This director named Babis Makritis made a film called L, just the letter L, that I saw at Sundance in 2012. And it was a midnight screening of it. And it's such a slow, it's like, if you think my movies are dry, this thing is the driest thing possible. And I just dug the fuck out of it. I loved L. And I remember just it kind of like, I made The Cub right after it. And it was just like reaffirming where I wanted to be tonally. I would say that Paul Thomas Anderson is a huge, huge influence, even though on paper we probably don't look much alike at all. But I think that Punch Drunk Love, another movie where the first time I saw it, I remember saying, I don't like this movie. And then the second time I saw it, thinking, actually, there's something here. And then third time going, this is my favorite movie of all time. And I think that there's that, it's a movie that takes place in reality, but not at the same time. And I think that those types of worlds, I love. Okay, so people, even when you make a movie that's grounded, it's supposed to be hyper realistic. There's improv maybe, or they're just trying to get the most realistic performance out of people. I always still know I'm watching a movie. So like I can enjoy those films, but I never forget I'm watching a movie. If I'm going to make a movie, I'd rather just like build a world and make a movie. Like let people do things that they wouldn't do in reality. Let's escape for a little while, even if it's an escape to something that's kind of hard to watch or scary or sad or whatever it is. I like that escape. So I lean into it, and I like that Punch Drunk Love, even though it's not necessarily hyper real. It's not like super, super stylized. You never quite feel like it's our world too. And I like those types of things. So Paul Thomas Anderson, Hal Ashby, like Being There is one of my favorite movies of all time. And oh man, I look back to like stuff when I was younger. Breaking Away, the like small town bike racing movie, was one that I just absolutely loved. I love the writing of it and the like sincerity of it. And yeah, I'm all over the place, but I think that things that influence me, I mean, you can throw Wes Anderson in there too, like Life Aquatic. When I first saw that, it was at a very pivotal point for me where I was realizing that I did like movies. I actually got into movies pretty late. I was probably like 16 when I started going and seeing more independent things. And Life Aquatic I saw in the theater and just remember being blown away. And everyone else, I think at that point was like, I think this is a misfire from him. It's not necessarily, it's not Rushmore, it's not Royal Tenenbaums, but I got more out of it than those movies. So I think it just hit me at the exact right moment.
Man, that's funny. Life Aquatic, that's an offbeat humor. And I had misjudged you by thinking your films were going to be offbeat too. And I don't even think they're dry. I think your films are constantly funny. Like I find myself just sitting watching your characters like scroll on Instagram, and I it's funny. There's like a self-awareness to everything that I sync up with. And I mean I get the Wes Anderson not getting it, but do you find a lot of people call your work dry?
It's been happening recently. Like I definitely look at things that people say and I don't take it to heart. It's like interesting more than anything to read reviews or like letterboxed things, but I'm going to make the things I'm going to make regardless. It's just nice to sometimes see like whether they like it or not. And that dry, like people in some bigger reviews have been saying dry as a desert or drier than dust and things like that, where I'm like, oh, fuck, I guess I'm dry. But I don't see it that way either. So it's funny. It's just funny. And it's nice to, like, when you guys talk about it, I think that that's the audience that I am. So it's cool to hear you say these things. But then I'm also getting people saying like, what was yesterday? Wired wrote an article, or there was an article in Wired that decided to just like fucking run over me with a truck and say that people compare his work to Yorgos Lanthimos, which is an insult to Yorgos Lanthimos. And it's just, everyone has opinions and that's okay. But I just don't. What was I going to say? I just continue. I want to keep making the stuff that makes me happy and makes me laugh. And it's nice to know that there are like-minded people out there who feel like the same way as me. I think that Duel is always funny, and even though it's as dark as like it is, I never stop like laughing at it. So that's always the goal. I want to make things that make me laugh.
Well, so what, Riley? What if we say if it's dry like a nice white wine? How about that?
Love that. Yeah, see, Duel is a nice white wine.
There we go. Russell, go to Letterboxd and put that in there, and let's start our own debate.
It's a Chardonnay that your grandpa would drink.
I don't get it. You know, honestly,
words are weird.
No, people are dumb. Everybody wants to be a critic now, and I constantly struggle because we do this show and we talk about movies twice a week, and yet at the end of the day, I know I'm just an enthusiast. And what I like to do is I like to watch movies with people. And you've given me a great gift with Duel. It's the rare occasion that I really think Duel's a gateway drug, and I mean that to like a deeper understanding of film. Because now, when is Duel out? Is it out already?
It like technically is out tonight in some places. So we're doing some Thursday night screenings, like in Burbank and in New York, there's one, but tomorrow is the official release day for theatrical. And I don't think that it's going to be it's not as big of a release as Self-Defense was, which was around 500 theaters. I think we're more around the 100 to 150 from what I understand, but it's a very peculiar time to release a movie, particularly an independent film. Yeah. And a lot of people aren't going back to theaters yet. So I am very happy with where we're at. And I think that RLJE is too, and they know what the market is. So the expectations are that this is going to be something that continues to grow. But I'm hoping that the people who are excited about it go see it in a theater, because I have seen it now a couple of times with an audience, and it's night and day different. Like when you think about people from Sundance at their house watching it alone or with a small group of friends on their TV or on their laptop or whatever, that's cool that they got to do that. But I am so much of a proponent for the theatrical experience, especially for comedies. And so I hope that people are able to do that with this.
Well, you're playing out here in Phoenix, baby. So I'm doing what I can to. Yeah, I'm trying to get the groundwork. I'm passing out flyers after we wrap up the show. So we're doing what we can.
Can I mention too? So it's funny that I had the fear with the trailer for The Art of Self-Defense that it was coming across in a way that I don't think that the movie is. And it's funny that you've echoed that. Like, I was worried when you start seeing people on Letterboxd saying things like, I thought this movie was going to suck, but I actually ended up liking it. That shows that there was a disconnect in the way that it was presented. And I think that there is an innate nature of silliness of people wearing, like grown-ups wearing karate gis. And so I'll take that. I know that that image is not going to be like the most exciting thing for people to see. And they're going to be like, what the fuck is this? But I do think that when you make something and present it in a way that tries to sell people on the like slapstickness of it, or like you said, the twee-ish sort of cute, quirky side of it, when there's so much more going there, I worried that we were going to miss out on that audience like you, who might have loved it, but then never saw it because of the way that it was sold to them. I'm glad that now people are, like you said, you guys are going around and telling people about this movie and saying, no. And I think that that's why it's continued to grow. And I think that Duel is in a little different space because we've sold it in a way. I like the trailer a lot for Duel. And I think that it sells the movie pretty accurately, while I still think it withholds some stuff which is exciting when you watch and more nuanced when you watch. So I think we're in a good space, but I again just think it's going to be one of those things that always has people kind of saying, did you hear about this thing? Like, and then they show their friends. So it'll be interesting to see where it goes from here.
Well, like I said, it's a gateway drug, and with everything everywhere all at once, the thing about that movie is, there's metaverse stuff going on, and it's an action-packed film, and it's a lot of fun. And then, there's what the movie's really about, which is like losing your family and like trying to really maintain that even in daily struggles. And at the end of, we saw it at the Alamo. And I didn't have the urge to get up and talk to our buddy who, shout out to Terrell, love you, man, who adored the film. But I don't think he really got that like underlying, like, the subtext there. And it was kind of heavy handed anyway. But with Duel's a movie you can completely enjoy. And it's got this rich lore of combat with, one thing, you're diagnosed as terminal. And then you have this gift of renewal in life. And then you come back and now you have to like kill your counterpart because none of them are ever going to want to be put down. And there's that. And then there's, the subtext there. And I think Duel's going to be, it's going to be my gateway drug. I can't wait to get a group of people together and watch this film with them and then sit around for 2 hours after and talk about what they thought and like kind of just deconstruct what you've created here. I can't imagine what your pre-production looked like. Like, how long did you work on this script?
I came up with the initial idea, the very, very bare bone idea, 2016. 2017 was a weird year for me, but I wrote half of a short story version of this, which got more in depth to like the science behind the cloning, and there's more character exploration about certain things, but then other things I developed more for the script. So I wrote half of the short story, put it away temporarily while I was dealing with some stuff, and then Self-Defense got greenlit. So we were off to Louisville, Kentucky to go shoot that. Went into the editing process. And then finally, when that was all done, I picked up and carted everything out for Duel, picked it all up and drove to San Diego and spent a week there just away from my place here and just like fully focused on writing that script. So I'd been thinking about it for at least 2 years before I started writing it. And then from 2018 to when we started shooting, so another 2 years before I actually got to make it, or like a year and a half, let's say. And so 3.5, or sorry, yeah, no, 4.5. What is it? 3.5 or 4 years or so of like thinking with this movie about this movie. And I am very much a first draft sort of writer, but like the thought that I put into it prior to that, I think is like a draft of its own, if not multiple drafts. So the final script is technically a first draft, but the amount of hours I spend thinking about it is like innumerable.
Yeah, your movie just, it works. Like on every, like whenever we're talking about like film theory and we're trying to deconstruct a film and, we're all human and stories, it's how we kind of learn life. Usually most movies don't hold up. And I've learned in the past that I kind of like that. Like if you try to figure out what Videodrome's about, you're wasting your time because the theory in the movie, it fizzles out by the third act. Yet in your film, it's like, it's not only it doesn't only work, it just gets better. And like the idea of having more knowledge on the science element, I think would hurt it. Like
I agree. That's why it's not in the script.
Perfect. I mean, dude, all of your secondary cast, they almost feel like they're like inner projections or something. Like kind of like when she goes to the doctor, it's almost like she's being her own therapist or something. Like I haven't really mulled over it yet, but there's an interesting way that it's I think it's really the dialogue, because we open up with her and she's very to the point, and it feels like, I don't know, maybe I'm in my head too much all day, but I felt myself in this character, and just, what is anxiety, right? And it's kind of like what could be or what will be. And I'm like, dude, this whole movie feels like a projection, like a long weekend with nothing to do, and I'm just thinking about all the things I could have done. Except, there's a duel in this. I'm curious, where did your Sarah character come from?
I mean, it's impossible not to write characters with a big basis in me and like things that I think and my thoughts and fears. Like self-defense is very specifically, it comes from the place of me trying to figure out who I was as a man and not feeling masculine enough. And I think a lot of men feel that way. Whereas Duel, similarly, it's like, am I taking enough action in my life? Am I being proactive? Am I really making the best version of myself? Or am I letting myself down? And I think that around the time that I was writing the short story version of it, again, going through some life changes and everything, it was impossible not to let those feelings of like despair and like complacency overtake me. But I also knew that I could change that. And so I think that Duel is not necessarily like a literal translation of life experiences for me, but it's definitely rooted in feelings that I felt. And I think that a lot of people are able to relate to it in that regard, because I'm not saying it's specifically this or specifically that about me. It's just like, this happens to be this very large thing of this like life or death stakes for Sarah. But then we've got the more, I guess, mundane elements of life, the banal elements of life that kind of are, that we all feel are also affecting her and are affecting Sarah's double. My composer, Emma Ruth Rundle, when she watched it for the first time, just like related it to it in a way that I wasn't even expecting, like I hoped. And it was so cool then to see that other people who, like, especially director friends who were watching it and giving me their thoughts and notes, that they were able to find themselves in the character too. And I was like, they haven't had the same experience as her, and I haven't had the same experience as them, but we all relate to it in our own way. And that was what I was really after. So yeah, for me, it was fully influenced by my life and influenced by all of those things that are in my head. But I wanted Sarah to exist. Like, I didn't want it to be me.
Okay. When did you start training?
I started training jiu-jitsu in May of 2012.
How old were you, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, 26 when I started, 25 maybe.
Did you have any anxiety going into it? Like, man, am I too old, or like I have
Yeah, fully. Like, that's a part of what influenced The Art of Self-Defense. Like, was me. It was mainly a movie about my thoughts and fears about masculinity, but it also, like, there's literally him walking through the door and being like, I don't know if I can do this. And it took me 3 years to walk through the door at the dojo that I started at, or the academy, I guess I should say, that I started at. I drove by it one day while I was working in Glendale on the show that I was writing on, and I was like, I'm going to go in there. And then literally 3 years later, I finally got the courage to walk through those doors. And then once you do, you go, every single other person here is just a normal person. There's not like fighters here. It's all like a doctor, teachers, or lawyers, or whatever, parents, and all different shapes and sizes and ages. And it really was one of those things where I was like, I should have done this so long ago. Like, if I had been, I would have been training for almost 13 years now had I done that, which is crazy. But I'm glad that I did it when I did it. And I always felt like I started too late. But now I'm 35, and I have people going like, I'm 40. Like, I feel like I'm too old. I'm like, start now. Like, you'll love it. It's so great. I think that that's something that we all are guilty of, is not taking that action earlier and then regretting it always.
Yeah, I kind of felt like I knew where you were going to go with that, but I think I needed to hear it.
Yeah. I mean, people always say too, they're like, wait, you were 26 when you made your first feature? Oh my God, I'm so old. Like, I remember when I was 26 making it going like, God, like Spike Lee made his at 23. And like, yeah, you're always going to compare yourself to other people, which again comes back to the movie. It's like in our lives, we may not be dealing with a clone of ourselves, but we've got people that we look up to or people that maybe we don't like, and we're jealous of how they've gotten to where they are, who they are as a person, works in a way that you're like finding yourself feeling like jealous of. I think that that's super relatable for that reason as well.
Yeah, man, okay. Now that I know that this episode will be out the day that the film's out, I don't feel as bad treading in more details. But I had a different experience with the movie than Clark and Randy, I'm sure, because I'm a creature of commitment, and I've been with Oksana for over a decade now, right? Even though she still won't marry me, and I don't have her mic on, so she can't defend herself. But
I heard a little chuckle.
Here's the thing. Man, every now and then I'll talk to her and I'll be like, we really got to focus on doing things without each other because we literally do everything together. And it's almost like this weird like punishment I'm doing with myself because we have a lot of fun doing everything. But I'm like, I used to work out a lot more. And when I'm watching Duel, we have a relationship who, when we start the film, we get a vibe that maybe Sarah's boyfriend Peter's cheating on him. Now, there's not a lot of concrete evidence, but it's enough for a regular person to feel insecure. And, she gets diagnosed with a terminal disease that can't be identified. But the clone comes in and seems to be doing things perfectly, even though the clone is very different in like a superficial way. And she takes to training and she becomes so happy while doing it. And I know like I've been there too, like when I'm really trying to lift weights or I'm out there like actually like hiking. And then, you get to a point where you're kind of happy again and you just kind of fall back into it. And I've never seen that portrayed so tragically on film before. and it's funny that people call your movie dry because normally I'm scared. Like I come in here and I'm a fan of everybody we talk to, mostly. And I knew you were going to have a good sense of humor. And it's just your movie's dark. I wouldn't call it dry. It's a fucking dark comedy. And
I agree.
Have you ever done stand-up or anything?
No, it's funny. Jesse Eisenberg always tried to convince me that I would make a good sketch writer, like a comedy sketch writer. And it's something I never had an interest in, and I never did stand up. I never wrote comedy sketches or anything like that. But I think the thing that he got from Self-Defense specifically, but Duel has it too, is that there's like you are introduced to specific scenarios. Each scene kind of has its own little story in it. So, for example, in this movie, there's a training sequence where they're fighting each other in slow motion, and that feels like a sketch in its own way. And in Self-Defense, you can look at the belt scene, which feels like when he's giving Sensei his black casual belt, like that feels like a sketch in a weird way. And they're sketches that fit within the context of an overall narrative. But I'd never thought of them that way. But I do think that I write for scenes to work. They could almost work individually and not literally. I don't think that they fully would, but I think that there's enough there where you could go like, oh, I could see how this could be developed into something standalone if you needed to. But yeah, no experience with stand-up or anything like that. I would be mortified.
Dude, you're a hell of a comedic writer.
Thanks. It's easy to sit down and write something. It's one thing to do that. It's another thing to perform or like when I talk about things, I don't think I'm on the like super funny on a surface level, but I think every once in a while something slips through and I'm like, oh, good, okay, that worked. But I find it way easier to sit and be myself when I write. And I guess it's because you get time, you get like to think about it. But I also think that I just am able to come up with things in my head that are funny to me. But when I'm on the spot, I'm not that same person. It's an interesting thing.
So, Riley, I always have an escape plan mapped out of areas to, leave. If I ever have to go on the lam, things like that. One of those places is Finland. Don't ask me why. So how was filming in Finland? And, please, if it was a good experience, sell me on it Because I'm looking. I'm shopping.
I love Finland. I shot in a small town outside of Helsinki, like an hour and a half outside, called Tampere. And they basically just like rolled out the red carpet for us. And we were the first US production to shoot entirely in Finland. They've had scenes shot there before, but the fact that we were like breaking some new ground there was really special for us. And I think it was special for the country. We shot at the peak of COVID. Like I said, we're boots on the ground prepping August of 2020. And there were no vaccines at that point. We were one of the first productions back in let alone one of the first indies. So a lot of what we did was completely new and scary. It was always scary. We were doing our whole like testing every other day, which is incredibly expensive. There's always this weight on your shoulders of worrying, is somebody going to get COVID? And then it shuts down the entire production. I think you have to remember where your head was in 2020 as opposed to now. I think we're used to going back into grocery stores without masks, and everyone has this certain sense of like security that we've got your booster or whatever it is, or the variants are weaker. But at that point, one person gets it and the entire thing just like stops. And we maybe would have started again, but the money would have changed, I'm sure, in some way. So very, very terrifying at all times, but also loved that country so, so much. I went back recently and showed the film in that town for a lot of the people who worked on it and local like film resources and just like everyone who was involved. And just remembered how much I loved it. I kind of was like, was I just fond of it because of the experience of shooting a movie there? But I loved the country. And then Helsinki, I didn't spend a lot of time there while I was shooting. I basically didn't go anywhere because I didn't want to get COVID. So when I finished the film, I spent 2 days in Helsinki before flying home. And that was enough to go, I'm going to come back here. And then going back recently, I spent probably like 3 or 4 days in Helsinki as well, and just fell in love with it all over again. It's a beautiful, beautiful place. I would love to visit there in the summertime because you have days that are like 18 hours long and everyone's just out on the water and drinking beer or long drinks. And the architecture ended up just being so beautiful too. And really informed the look and feel of our movie because it feels like it could take place in the Pacific Northwest, but definitely does not look like the Pacific Northwest in terms of the way that the buildings are designed. Just really embrace the quirks of that country. I think that it's going to be interesting when it comes out because people aren't going to be able to place where we shot it unless they are from Finland or have been to Finland. But everyone else is going to be like, where the fuck did they shoot this thing?
So did COVID have a direct hand in ending up in Finland?
Yeah, exactly. So we were looking at locations once it became clear that this was not going to be a 2-week and done sort of thing with COVID. We started looking at shooting locations in like Vancouver, Toronto, Pacific Northwest in the States. Albuquerque was floated, but I immediately threw that out because I just couldn't see that architecture working in the context of this film. So specific. And then some other places were floated, but it's still just like the numbers were all incredibly scary. And we even looked at New Zealand, which would have been incredibly expensive. And just you quarantine for 2 weeks and it was going to be very, very hard going there. And at that point, we were contacted by XYZ, produced the film. The financing that they have right now is out of a company from Finland, and they suggested to XYZ, have you ever looked at our country? And we kind of looked into it. We were pitched it, and I said yes immediately. It was a no-brainer for me. And pretty much right after that, I was getting ready to leave and go prep in that country.
So, I mean, were you kind of going for that type of, landscape, greenery, trees, that sort of was that you were thinking for the background of the film?
Yeah, if Finland hadn't come along and COVID didn't exist, I would have really pushed for Seattle or Portland to shoot in, specifically for that reason, the woods and the sort of dreary skies that you get most of the time. I wouldn't have wanted this film to take place in an area where you just have constant sun, like LA. It just wouldn't have suited the mood of the movie. Sure. So, very much liked the look of the country. Finland's biggest export is wood. They've got so many trees that they export wood more than any other country. So, or at least more per capita or whatever it is. So that, and the fact that they per capita drink more coffee than any other country, I was like, all right, trees and coffee, two of my favorite things. Let's go.
Really? Per capita?
Yeah, per capita, they are the biggest imbiber of coffee.
Oh, well,
it's
Randy?
Shit coffee, but it's coffee.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah, they drink like watery coffee, but they drink it all day long. And like you finish a meal and coffee is free. So like you finish a meal, you get pizza or something. There's a station and you just go like do the little pressy thing on the dispenser and you have a free cup of coffee after that. So that's pretty cool. I'm a big cold brew drinker though, so I brought that with me. My assistant got a coffee shop, a little mom and pop place to brew it for me. When I wasn't making it for myself, I would go in and buy it from them. And I've heard since that it's starting to take off a little bit more. So I like to think that I brought cold brew to that Nordic country.
Changing the coffee culture, man.
Exactly. Trying to get them on the good stuff.
Funny, give me very Twin Peaks vibes there. Also, Randy mentioned that David Lynch makes terrible coffee. So thank you for that, Randy.
Oh, interesting. I've heard that the beans aren't bad, but I don't know. I haven't had them, so.
It's very dark. Not my thing.
Thank you, Randy, for your contribution.
Also,
are we talking about the movie or the beans?
Or Lynch.
Both.
I like the movie more, though.
Okay, cool. I'll take it.
I know we don't have a video component, but normally whenever we have a guest on, Randy will leave his camera off. Today, he's dressed up in his nicest taxi driver attire and has left the camera on the whole time. I'm
glad that I got to hear his voice. I kept thinking this is gonna pay off. What's gonna happen? What's he gonna do?
Well, while we're here, I believe you know one of my friends, Joey Ragoza from King Woman.
From where?
King Woman.
Oh, of course. Yeah. That's so funny. Yeah, I was at his place recently, even.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I used to
he's
live
friends with Mitch Wells from Thou, the bass player of Thou, and I went up there and saw Bjork recently and stayed on his beanbag.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I used to live a couple miles away from him in San Francisco, and he grew up with some of my friends back in California. I'm in Atlanta now.
Okay, cool. Yeah, very cool guy. That is a small world.
Yeah. Randy, what are you doing? Why are you turning this into a meet cute or some shit?
I'll tell him you said what's up.
Dude, now I'm worried. Riley, are you a goddamn hardcore kid?
When I was in high school, I was into like grindcore and like, I don't know, I guess, I listened to death metal and stuff too. I'm pretty much an equal opportunity metal guy. Not really a like hate breed type of hardcore guy. I'm not into that kind of stuff. I can get down with like old hardcore, but no, I tend to go more like.
We didn't get hate breed vibes from you, so.
You didn't? Yeah.
No.
I'm more like old Dillinger Escape Plan was a big thing for me. But my bigger things like ISIS is probably my favorite band ever. And now out of bands that exist still that aren't retired, Sumac is like, oh, so good. And Mogwai is probably my favorite band, like touring and still. So I'm all over the place, but I do love big instrumentally stuff too.
Rad. Okay, you're more in my territory in the past, and now you've moved into Randy territory. I'm glad to know where you stand. Because Randy, he's our hardcore representative who broke Edge a couple years ago. So
that's right.
He started dosing shrooms, and now we get his best Travis Bickle look. Am I the only one that's seeing that? Right when you turn that on, I'm seeing Travis Bickle.
Well, are you calling his receding hairline a mohawk?
No, it's more the jacket, really. Randy, do you have a gun in there?
That's an overshirt.
No. Yeah, it's just a long sleeve shirt. It's a button down, button up, whatever you call it.
You don't know your couture. That's all this is.
Look what I'm wearing. I'm dressed like I'm still in high school, dude. Like,
Confirmed.
You mentioned couture, and my brain immediately went to, there's a fighter, Randy Couture. So,
that's very good, Randy Couture. We did it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that really accurately represents Randy, by the way. He got into a fight recently with the curb, and he was bloodied up, but he also left some blood on the curb too, Randy. Good job. Yeah.
That's true. It's a long story. We don't have time for that.
All right, well, Russ, we got a few more minutes. Anything else for Riley?
I don't know, man. Riley, I don't know. I feel lame saying it, but I really think you're one of the most interesting, I hate to use this word, but visionary. Like you as a film fan who has a projector in his house, and we started doing this whole Overlook thing just as an excuse to force people over to come watch movies with us and kind of think of them in a critical way. We really need directors like you. You make thoughtful films that are engaging on a very like if you had a hard day at work and you want to go watch a fucking movie and you want to go to the Alamo and have a beer, dude, Duel's perfect. But if you're like kind of like artistically frustrated and you really need something thought-provoking, Duel's perfect. And we don't get a lot of that. And I'm glad that my friends like forced me to go watch The Art of Self-Defense.
You're welcome.
And, yeah, I'm a fan, Riley, and I'm happy we got to steal some time from you too.
This has been really fun. Yeah, like it's one thing to answer questions about a movie that I'm proud of, and it's another thing altogether to just like talk a little bit more conversationally about things that I'm inspired by and that you guys got from it and everything. So yeah, this was so much fun.
Well, the thing is, I'm sorry, Clark. I feel like you're kindred because I think. Me, Randy, and Clark, we're dudes who love film, and we figured out a way to hang out every week and talk about it. Yet we're kind of confronted with the reality that looks like we don't know where film's going to be in the next 20 years. And even for theaters, we're like fighting to keep them open. And I think it's really easy to keep that fire burning when we have directors like you. Yet at the same time, Clark mentioned I'm contrarian, and I instantly want to fight everything A24 puts out. Which is stupid because I feel like that's the same wheelhouse here.
They still put out great stuff. Yeah.
Marcel the Shell. I can't wait to watch that one.
Dude, looks great. Honestly, yeah, I'm so stoked for. It's hard to be mad at a company for being really good at what they do, and that's what A24 is. And so I think it's like when a band gets really big, and then the original fans go like, "Fuck that band, they sold out." I think that's happening a lot with A24. It's not their fault. They're just really good at what they do.
Yeah. I actually, my complaint is something we talked about earlier, where you were worried that your trailers were kind of signaling one thing and then your movie was another. I feel like A24, they love to dangle out that horror film, and then you get in there and you're like, there's not a lot of horror here. Like, that's my real beef with them. But I mean, at the end of the day, I fucking bought everything they put out for The Green Knight. I went to Lamb. I even wanted to buy that release. I didn't love Midsommar. I bought the director's cut. So I don't know. I just need hot takes, I guess.
Well, I promise you that if I ever make a horror film, I won't call it elevated horror.
We appreciate
that to us, dude. But no, before you go, we'd be fools not to. One of the main things we do here is we talk about found footage horror and in-world camera because we run a film fest, the Unnamed Footage Festival, and I'd be amiss if I didn't do my weekly attempt to try and turn you into making some sort of found footage movie or faux documentary. I know you got it in you, the quirky character work, the beautiful cinematography. Like, we really need some help in this subgenre. So
I maybe would have to experiment with a short form version first. If that works, then I could see going bigger. It's not a genre that I've felt like I would be particularly good at. But I think that it's because I tend to think of it in the context of documentary, and I feel like documentaries are so hard. But then I talked to my friend David Ferrier, who's a really great documentary filmmaker, made a film called Tickled and Dark Tourist on Netflix. And he's like, oh man, I could never make a narrative film. So I think that it takes a specific brain to do one or the other, and very few people like Edgar Wright or who else that are good at both. So I would love to figure that out someday too. But in the meantime, I'll try to work on the narrative version of that, like a found footage.
Oh yeah, you could totally do it as long as your character is the one crafting the film. It counts. So if you ever make a short, dude, we'll send you a waiver. We'll save you that $10 entry or whatever.
Amazing. Yeah, I would really appreciate that.
Riley, I'm a fan for life, dude. Thank you so much for taking the time out to hang out with us.
You guys have been awesome. This has been a really fun interview, and I'm looking forward to like more people seeing this movie. And if anything y'all do helps that, then I'm so excited and thankful.
Duel's out now. Go say it. Thanks, Riley.
There you go. I'm so excited and thankful now. Yeah, that's great.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Overlook Hour. And if you would like to hear more, please subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever your podcatcher of choice is. And while you're there, go ahead and give us a rating and or a review, which is a very easy way for you to support this show that we bring to you every week for years now, free of charge. And as always, you can find us on YouTube at The Overlook Theater, Instagram at The Overlook Theater, Facebook at The Overlook Hour, and Twitter at The Overlook Hour. Last but not least, you can send us your emails and tell us how much you like or dislike the show at overlookhour@gmail.com. And if you're nice, maybe we'll read them on the show. I've been your engineer, Randy Stat. Please join me along with Clark, Russell, and Oksana again next time. Bye.